I'm very excited to be joined by Katherine Armstrong for today's session. Katherine has worked in publishing for over 15 years and is the Deputy Publishing Director for Crime and Thriller Fiction at Simon Schuster. She's previously worked at Bonnier Safra, Faber and Little Browns. There's some really big names there. Her speciality is crime and thriller fiction, and one of her first acquisitions was Safe House by Chris Ewan, which sold over 500,000 copies, so you are definitely in safe hands for this session. She was also one of the founding organisers of First Monday Crime Nights in London and is programme consultant for Noirland, which is a great name, a new international crime fiction festival in Belfast. So hi, Katherine, are you there?
I am. Hi, Libby. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to hand over to you now, and yeah, it'd be great to hear from you.
Great, thank you. And hi, everyone. It's brilliant to see where you're all from. That's quite a worldwide group. So thank you for coming along tonight, today, this morning, this afternoon, just after tea break, whatever it is, to our discussion on how to get published. I hope it helps you. And as Libby said, please feel free to ask some questions at the end in the Q&A box. Happy to answer them, happy to help. So my goal today is to take you through how to get published, the steps of how to get published, but also to talk about a bit about the realities of getting published. As you'll all be very aware, writing is a solitary business, and while the publishing industry is very rewarding, it can also be incredibly honest and bruising at times, I think is probably fair to say. I know authors who've taken 10 years to get published, and other authors who've been lucky to find the right agent and the right publisher and have been published very quickly, but every author's path to publication is different. Publishing is a creative business, and I think sometimes we forget that it's also a business. It was best described to me by somebody I used to work with as an industry run by arts graduates, which is pretty good, actually, very true. So some authors can make a full-time living out of their writing, but unfortunately a lot of authors can't unless they've got other means of support. Val McDermott, for example, worked as a journalist for many years until the Tony Carroll books enabled her to give up the day job, and I feel everybody probably knows J.K. Rowling's story. If you haven't read it already, there is a really good book called The Forest for the Trees by a US editor called Betsy Lerner. It's a book about her advice as an editor to writers, and in it she says there's no stage of the writing process that doesn't challenge every aspect of a writer's personality. You ask any writer, any author, and they will say the same thing. Writing is a tough business, but those same authors will say it's probably pretty much the best damn job they've ever had, and they wouldn't change anything. They might want to change their advance payments, but you get the point. When asked why they wanted to be a writer, Flannery O'Connor said, because I'm good at it. The US poet John Ashbery said, because I want to. And US writer Anne Lamott said, because other than writing, I'm completely unemployable. Being a writer is an incredibly rewarding experience as you write stories that connect with readers across the globe. There's no more satisfying validation for all the hard work you put in as a writer than to hear back from readers and to see your books in bookshops. But it can be incredibly frustrating business, and it requires a lot of perseverance, patience, and above all, a thick skin. Not everyone will love your work, unfortunately. Not everyone will get your vision for what you're trying to create, and acknowledging that from the beginning helps. Reviews by either readers or critics who don't get it are absolutely gut-wrenchingly horrible. But then you get reviews by the readers and the critics who did love your work, and it makes it all okay again. You're probably all have these books, but I just wanted to sort of name check a few that I've read over the years myself, and sort of things like Stephen King's On Writing, obviously. Anne Lamott, who I mentioned earlier, Bird by Bird, some instructions on writing and life is also very good. There's James Wood, How Fiction Writes, Ian Forster, Aspects of the Novel, John York, Into the Woods, Annie Dillard, The Writing Life, A.L. Kennedy on Writing. There is a gamut out there of books on writing that you will, I'm sure have got most of them, but also I'll send a list to Libby and she can pass it on. So getting published then. If you want to get published, you have options as how to proceed. The more traditional route, which is the one that I'm involved in, and I'll be talking about today is by being taken on by a literary agent who will work on your behalf to make a deal with a publisher to publish your book. The other route is to self-publish, either by Amazon or by having a small number of copies printed yourself and approaching bookshops to stock them. But like I said, I know the traditional route best, so that's what I'm going to talk about. I will just mention in terms of Amazon, while they give authors good royalty rates, the author does have to do a lot. The publisher does things like cover marketing, publicity, sales, etc., which some people enjoy doing. And some people get very obsessed with manipulating the metadata and to try and sort of make your book more visible on Amazon. But other people don't. It takes time, it takes effort that you may or may not have. It's entirely a personal choice. If you did decide to go down a self-published route, I would say it's worth investing some money in getting a decent copy edit and a proofread on your novel, because I think that's the one thing that you will get feedback on. having worked on books where there's been like 1 or 2 spelling errors, and it's people do tell you about them, which is good, so you can correct them for further editions. But yeah, it's worth investing in that if you don't get a traditional deal. So why go down the agent route? So literary agents represent your interests with an editor and a publishing company. They are there to get you the best deal that they can. They're also helpful if you find that you have an issue with the publisher, say you don't like the cover or the payment's late or something, you know, they're the ones who will get in touch with the editor to sort these issues out. They're the ones who are fighting on your behalf. And you don't want to necessarily, as an author, have that. If there is anything that might be slightly contentious, you want to have a very clear, demarcated role with your publisher and your editor, and you don't necessarily want to have you don't necessarily want to have any awkward conversations. So that is where the agent earns their commission. Hopefully there wouldn't be, and there usually isn't. But the other thing that an agent's very good at is talking you through the contract, because the contract that you sign with a publisher can be quite confusing, actually, even for somebody like me who's been around for nearly 20 years. There's a lot of like royalty rates and you know, sort of bits and bobs that you just look at and you go, I don't know what that means. So the agent will take you through step by step, and they will tell you whether or not you are getting a good deal. Basically, that's what they're there for. And it's worthwhile noting, actually, that for agents, you don't pay them anything until they sell your book to a publisher. So they will take a percentage of what your advance will be. So if you get approached by anyone who says they're an agent, but you have to pay them money up front, that is not a traditional agent. So I would say steer clear of that. So obviously the idea is to have a good working relationship, and you don't want to be the bad guy. That's the agent's role, if it's necessary. And then the other thing that you're going to an agent for is their little black book of contacts. Many agents have been in publishing for years. A lot previously were editors themselves, and specifically if they work within, like, for example, crime and thriller genre, then they will know who the crime and thriller editors are and what they're looking for, because a lot of what an agent does is liaise with editors. We take them out for coffee and lunch, or they take us out for coffee or lunch or drink. Quite nice, actually, in normal times, and we talk to them about what are we looking for right now? Do we have a gap in our list? You know, if people were publishing, and what would we like to fill it? And do they have an author that they can give to us or send to us to read that might potentially fit the list? And I think the other thing is, because they are the taste test for a publisher and editor, that that there's a lot of agents, and there's a select number that I would say absolutely I'll drop everything for as soon as they send me something and they tell me it's brilliant, because I know their taste and I know they know my taste. And so I know that that's the, they send me something that is going to be the one that I read that night, or I read the next day. I read it basically as soon as I can. And so that's what you're paying them for, basically, is their contacts and the specifics of the deal. And the other thing for us is, the editor is looking to deal with an agent and an author who they feel that are compatible with their vision. And it's particularly important. And I always think that the relationship between an editor and an author is important, but the relationship between an agent and an author is even more important, because you want to get the author that shares you get the agent that shares your author vision. There's nothing worse, I would think, for an author would be to find somebody and jump into a deal and then realize they've signed a contract with somebody who wants to completely change their work. So I would say, if you have meetings with agents, that you talk to them about, where did they see your career going, and what do they think about the work that you've submitted? How would they change it? It's a lot of the same questions that the agent asks the editor then when it comes to us, but it's very pivotal to get that relationship, that core relationship between an agent and an author from the get-go, to get the right agent for you. If you decide that actually further down the line they're not the right agent for you, that is absolutely fine. I know some authors who've changed, their career's developed in one direction and they've changed agents. There's, absolutely, it happens. But I would think try and get it from the beginning, because what an agent's looking for is to invest their time and expertise in your career long term, which is the same as what publishers and editors are looking for, is to invest in an author that they believe in and would like to have book after book after book, which is the ideal. And it's an investment of everybody's time. So if we can get it right from the start, that's really, that's the way to do it. In terms of then getting an agent, there are ways to send it, and I'm going to come to cover letters in a minute. There is the Writers and Artists Yearbook, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and that lays out sort of who the agents are, all the agencies, and who does what. If somebody does specific crime and thriller, if somebody does sci-fi, fantasy, etc. And I would say that going through that and then doing some online research as well is really good, because you then want to find out who do you approach. So maybe don't send a blanket approach out to every agent just saying dear X. If you've identified a small group of agents to start with and mention on your cover letter that you're sending to, say, 5 agents, then that shows that you've done your research. So you could say, dear X, I'm writing to you because I loved your work on whichever title. I'm a huge fan of this author that you have on your books. And that just shows the agent that you are thinking in terms, actually thinking quite strategically. And the one thing I would say, though, is checking out who they've got on their books. If you're writing, for example, in the genre that Mark Bellina and Val McDermott are, and you approach 2 different agents, but you've got their agent has a lot of people like that on their books, they might not necessarily want to take on anymore, but it's always a good place to start. And actually, if you're not sure of agents, then look at the acknowledgements page at the back of the books and the authors that you think you're writing in the area with, because they usually should acknowledge their agent at the very least. So that's also just gives you a few names. And no agent wants to lose out on a potential manuscript to another agent. So that's why I would say, if you are doing a small group of agents, just it's a courtesy to say, I'm sending this to 5 agents, and then it's up to them. If then you know, that's one agent comes back to you immediately or very quickly, then again, it's a courtesy just to say to the other agents, I've been approached by an agent. Are you still interested? But you can also just wait until you see if meet that agent and see if it develops anything further. It's a competitive business, and they don't get paid until you get a book deal. Yeah, so they will want to be on it as quickly as they can, especially if it sounds like it's going and you're gearing up to meet several agents. So moving on then to covering letters, which are very important. Your covering letter to an agent should be a warm-up. You don't have to be funny or have a personal story. It's not an X Factor edition. However, if you do have an unusual background that could help in promoting the book, but generally, you know, the agent only cares about the book and if you can write it. But if you do have a story that's linked to the reasons why you wrote the book, for example, that is perfectly happy to write about that in your covering letter. If you won a writing award or have completed a creative writing course or had anything published, then mention that in your covering letter as it's a relevant experience. If you were once, I don't know, like the runner-up in the egg and spoon race when you were in primary school, I wouldn't mention that. So what they're looking for is a few lines about what kind of book you've written, an acknowledgement that you know who the agent is, what authors they represent, what books they've been involved in, always a plus. However, if the agent has a lot of authors on their list who write in the same genre, like I've mentioned, that you're writing in, that they may be less likely to take you on, hence a bit of research before you approach. So the covering letter, I'm going to share my screen. And there we go. So obviously with a cover letter, lay it out nicely, spell check, and do check who you're sending it to as well. I've had submissions sent to Karin Armstrong, who I believe is a sort of religious writer, and that is unfortunately not me. So make sure you're clear about what genre you're writing in from the first line, although if you're unsure, an agent as a first reader can help point you in the right direction. I have known authors who didn't know or didn't think that they were writing a domestic thriller, psychological thriller, until the agent pointed it out to them. They thought they were writing perhaps like dark women's fiction, for example. So do keep the letter fairly short, as I say here. 1 page max is great. Address your letter accurately. It's basic. It sounds really basic, but you would be absolutely surprised the number of letters agents and actually even editors get where things are just not done. There's no care and attention, and it is your first introduction to this person. So they want to know, you know, at the very least, do you know who they are? End your letter with an upbeat line. I always like that because it sort of is, it's much better. Maybe be very wary about flattery because sometimes I think it can come across as a bit false. So no gushing, basically. Feedback for all. By the way, I should say, actually, I'm going to make sure Libby has this as well to share with you all. So if you're trying to write it down, don't worry, you will get it. Not every agent has the time to respond to every author that submits to them. They get probably at least 70 plus manuscripts a week. So while they try and get back to as many as possible, a lot of the times they just don't have the time to do it, so they won't. Some authors are offended, believe it or not, to receive feedback. So if you want it, ask, and they hopefully will, but if they can't, they'll tell you. Don't anticipate a rejection. It's really off-putting if you start by saying something like, I'm sure this isn't really good, but I thought I'd send it to you anyway, but you probably won't like it, so I don't know why I bothered. Sorry for wasting your time. That is, no, just don't. Don't mention another agent recommended you to the agent, because you just don't know what the politics are there. And but if an agent, so if you, for example, met me and I said, oh, I would send it to, say, Jane Gregory, who's a brilliant agent, Val McDermott's agent actually, then you could, I'm happy for you, and most editors are, to say, if you write to an agent, say, Katherine Armstrong, Simon Schuster told me to send this to you. Don't tell the agent your family and friends love your novel. I get this quite a lot as well, and it's like, it's a given. But also, they're never going to not love your novel, even if they haven't read it. They're going to tell you it's brilliant. So what agents are looking for is validation from another source. Have you won an award for your writing? Has an editor looked at something and said, here, go to this agent? You know, it's that kind of thing. The main don't on this, I would say, is baked goods, things like that really scares people. When I worked at Faber, when I started my career, I was in the poetry editorial assistant, and I had to look after the poetry unsolicited pile, because that was a lot of poets don't have agents, or a lot of agents don't represent poets. So we got several hundred a month. And I think the creepiest one I got was a pair of surgical gloves that was sent in, and with the note that just read, "You'll need these to read my poetry," which is just like, no. So that's yeah, you want to give a good impression, just to it. It's like, again, with mocked up book jackets, photos of yourself, tasteful photos of yourself. Again, there's been some very interesting photos I've seen in my time about people and aspects of people. So I would say no, basically. And like I said, that's going to be shared. I'm going to pass that to Libby. But that kind of covers cover letters. It is very basic stuff. I think, you do know it, but it's sometimes good to have that little checklist just to kind of remind yourself, because with the best one in the world, especially if you're reading things on screen, you can miss something. And if you're sending a few out, just make sure you get the names right. So choosing an agent, like we've already touched on, it is to be with the one that you feel most comfortable with. The author agent relationship, like I've said, is the most important one. And it's imperative that you trust them and believe that they're working in your best interests. There are different agents out there in terms of, well, there's different editors out there as well, but in terms of some like to edit the book before it's sent out, others are more about the deal and will leave the editing to the editor. As an author, it depends very much on what you want an agent to do. If you'd prefer an agent to spend time working with you on your manuscript before sending it out to editors, because of course an editor will work on it as well when they've taken it on, then don't settle for an agent who won't do that. Bear in mind that when you speak to agents, unless you can travel to visit, and you will be doing it on Zoom at the moment, but unless you can travel to visit them, I'd suggest speaking to them on the phone once they've been in touch, or on Zoom. If they're interested in representing you, and more than once is advisable. You are interviewing them, which is also a key point to remember, as much as they are interviewing you. So don't be afraid to ask questions. This is your career. This is what you want to happen. You want to be a published author. So take it seriously. They're taking it seriously, and just ask whatever question you want to make sure that you feel comfortable with them and that they're the right agent for you. If you're not sure about them, then think it over first. You don't have to go with an agent just because they've offered you representation. You the aim is to find an agent, like I said, that will see you through years of a writing career. However, if you think you've got a good agent and sign with them, but then down the line, as I said, it's not working out, again, don't be afraid to change agents. Just check out, there's usually a clause in the contract about parting ways. And again, it's not uncommon. And likewise, they can decide that you'd be better off with another agent as well. So it's a reciprocal relationship. It's got to work for both of you. So most publishers, so submitting your manuscript, most publishers don't accept submissions anymore. This has been probably, since I think 2004, it used to be pre-2004, you could send in unsolicited manuscripts to publishers and people would read them, and then they got so many by agents that there just wasn't enough time to read submissions. For example, like every month I might get up to 30 or 40, maybe more submissions, and it does take time on top of working on the books that the authors that you have currently taken on and publishing them and editing them and looking at their sort of their career vision. Then it can be quite time consuming. Best part of the job, but it does take a lot of time. So agents are sort of, they filter things for editors. And as I mentioned earlier, where we do lunches, we do drinks, we do coffees and teas. And so we get to know each other's tastes. So an agent will be the first person to say, you've got this great standalone thriller set in Northern Ireland. I know exactly the editor to send that to, Katherine Armstrong, Simon Schuster, boom, and they'll reach out to me. So we know that if they've taken you on, then your manuscript is good. And there are some agents, like I mentioned earlier, that we prioritize over others if they send you submissions, because their submissions tend to go quickly, and there tends to be usually a lot of editors up for it. It tends to be a bit of an auction. So the other way to reach publishers, however, is occasionally, and SNS have just done this on the women's fiction side, is open their submissions to unagented authors for say one day. And we do that sporadically across the year, and we'll be doing it actually in a few months for the crime and thrillers. So do look out for that on the SNS Fiction Editorial Twitter. There are also competitions, things like the Richard and Judy W.H. Smith Searcher Bestseller competition, which again is something to go for. I actually published an author called Kaz Freer through that competition a couple of years ago, when Sweet Little Lies has done, at last count, because it was with my old publisher, about 300,000, 250,000, 300,000 copies. And so there are competitions you can enter. There's the CWA, who has a short story, the Marjorie Allen Short Story Award, and there are areas where you can reach an agent's attention and an editor's attention that isn't necessarily always going through an agent, or if it's taking time, you could do it in conjunction with. So we've covered cover letters and how it allows agents to get a gist of what your story is about. It helps them make a decision about whether or not your manuscript is right for their list. As I said, bearing in mind that they get a lot sent to them each week. So in order to maximize your chances by doing research into which agents who are and aren't taking on new clients, and actually something to remember is that a lot of the agents who've been around for a while and who now lead their companies, like brilliant, amazing agents like Jonathan Lloyd and Johnny Geller, Curtis Brown, they have quite a lot of authors on their list. They might have like 50 or 60 authors. So they may or may not want to take on a new author. They may not have room at that point. And it usually says on the website, actually, if an agent is still looking at their submissions are open. So again, good to check that out. But what you could look at is potentially an assistant agent who's up and coming and who is hungry to acquire their own authors for their list, and who are looking to build a list. So they will be working with the more senior agents as well, but they will be looking, because they want, basically at 20 years, they want to be them. It's like when I was an assistant editor, you know, it's a junior editor kind of thing, you know, it's like you work on a lot of books and you start taking on your own, so that when the time comes, you're ready to step up. You can't really be an editor until you're already an editor in many ways. You need to know, you need to get the experience, and it's the same with an agent. So most agents will ask you for, it's usually 3 chapters, double-spaced, single-sided, numbered pages, always helpful to include your name and title as a footnote in case the pages get separated, a full plot synopsis and a cover letter. And I would also include a stamped addressed envelope. And again, do check when you're doing your research, because these are all sort of, they will say online or in the Writers and Artists Yearbook how agents want you to submit. And my best advice is follow it to the letter. Don't slip in anything extra. Just, this is what they want, this is what they have time for. And again, check the website, double check the website. If they are closing their submissions for a while, or if they're not taking on clients, it's a waste of an essay to send it to them. They might not have anyone to look at it. So I would say just be very careful and research. So another tip, as I said, is to check the acknowledgement page, and a good author will always thank their agent, and editor too, hopefully. And again, just mention you're writing to them because they represent so-and-so. Some agents will only accept submissions by post, but more and more requesting email to an anonymous agency submissions email. So again, check how they want their submissions sent and follow the instructions. Don't necessarily expect an acknowledgement of receipt. I think usually once you send something in, you'll get an automatic bounce back saying thank you very much. And they might have something that says how long, if you don't hear back from us by within 4 months or something, then, sorry, or keep trying us. So agencies, because they get so many, can't necessarily acknowledge everyone, but I think if it's through email, it's easier. But do bear in mind, if you're submitting to an agent and you haven't yet finished your novel, then it's probably best to either have finished or to be about to finish. It's always better for an agent to see the whole book rather than a partial, unless it's non-fiction, which is completely different. Agents can sell novels based on, say, the first 30,000 words and a detailed what happens next synopsis, but most publishers prefer to view a finished manuscript because that shows us editors sort of what your writing style is, and it shows us that sometimes you read the first part of a novel in a partial and it looks great and the synopsis sounds great, but then actually when you continue through, it kind of loses its way, or it becomes a completely different novel than the one you thought you had. So it's good to sort of see the beginning, the middle, and the end from my point of view. You're in a stronger position basically once the book is finished. So I want to touch on briefly, I'm very aware of time, but I think I've not got too much to go, so don't worry. I want to touch on briefly the synopsis, which I will admit is the scourge of authors and editors alike. Synopses are incredibly hard to write well, so don't panic. Agents pretty much always ask for them because they want to know what your breakdown is of the novel. But as an editor, I tend not to read them first, unless I like the submission and want to know more. In terms of sending out your pack to an agent, put the cover letter at the top and then send your 3 chapters, and I put the synopsis at the end. So what is a synopsis? A synopsis gives you all the details, a breakdown of the book, including, very importantly, including the ending. It's not a blurb for your book. It is everything key that is in your book. Key characters, the journey they go on, and how it ends. So the editor and the agent will want to read, they'll read your cover letter, they'll think, okay, this sounds great for my list. They'll look at your 3 chapters and think, I like the writing, how does the story end? And then from the synopsis, they'll make the decision on whether or not they perhaps want to call it in. But again, it must include a complete exposition of the plot of your novel. You must reveal the ending. The agent needs to have a complete overview. It must be organized along the same lines of the novel itself and be written in more or less the same tone as the novel. It mustn't be written in sales speak. The job of synopsis isn't to sell the book to a reader, it's to sell the book to somebody who wants to take it on and work on it. It's to reflect its qualities. So you need to reveal the emotional development of the novel as well. So it is what links A to B to C to D until you get to Z or Z. It's best to kept to a maximum of 2 pages. So don't feel that you have to reveal every single minute detail about the book, but the overall narrative has to be there. If you're not sure how it will end, say so and outline options that you're considering if you have them. At a later date, the agent may ask you for a more detailed synopsis, which is usually known as a treatment, which would be like a complete in-depth breakdown chapter by chapter of what happens in character motivations. But in the first instance, just a 2-page synopsis. I think actually what it also does is it helps you clarify in your own mind, what is my book about? And you can pick out themes from it that you can then say to an agent when you're writing to them, I think this book is, I don't know, Harry Potter meets, Val McDermott on a beach, something like that, or, that you just shows that you kind of have thought it through and kind of have an inkling about where it might sit in the market, which is another thing that agents and editors are looking for is, where do you see your book? Who would you comp your book to? And if you had a copy of your book, where would you place it in the bookstore? Because I think that is one of the most important conversations I always want to have when I'm meeting an author for the first time, pre-acquisition, pre-acquiring them, because if my vision for that book doesn't match their vision and we can't agree, then I'm not the best editor for them. For that, and that's the same with an agent is, they'll have a view and you want to make sure they're on the same page. So I've said, so once you've submitted to an agent, then every agency has its own logging systems and going through the submissions pile. Some agents will read everything that's addressed to them. Others will have an assistant or a freelance reader take a look at it first, and they then pick out the manuscripts they're promising and that the agent will then read. No agency, key point, allows an assistant or anyone who isn't the agent to read a submission first unless they absolutely trust their taste and judgment, because what's the point of having them there to help them if they don't? Not that you would, but something I tell any potential author is, if you're following up on a submission to an agency, bearing in mind that some agents take up to a month or more to respond, please always be polite to whoever answers the phone in particular. Chances are they don't know what's happening with your submission, but they are more likely to help you if they like you and if you haven't been really rude to them. So, and good point to note that receptionists and assistants tend to run agencies, so get them on side. So things to remember, agents have a huge pile of reading to do as well as looking after their current clients, same with an editor. So when they sit down to look at the unsolicited pile, and it's also known as this, you might have heard it referred to as the slush pile in the industry. So unsolicited or slush pile, that it's the same, it's different words for the same thing. They're looking to be impressed and grabbed by what they read, and you really want to get their attention and keep it. So avoid sending submissions at busy times of year, for example, a few weeks before or after Christmas, because they don't want to read your submission when they're with their families. They most likely don't, I'm afraid. A lot of authors tend to finish writing over the summer and at the week after a bank holiday or a break over Easter, because they've got time. But again, it's remembering that you've been on break, and you know, they've been on a break as well. So they might not get back to you right away. And again, agents tend not to call or email potential authors unless their interest is serious. So if they've taken a while to get back to you, it doesn't mean that they're not interested. It just means potentially that it's a really busy period and they haven't got to it yet. If you have an agent interested in your work, like I said before, the right thing to do is to contact other agents you've submitted to and then let them know that you've interest, and they will undoubtedly prioritize your work. Most agencies do have an anonymous rejection slip, so it's from the agency but not one specific agent. It's standard and used throughout the industry. If you haven't asked for feedback, then an agent just doesn't have the time to get back individually to you, as I mentioned before. So it is not hard to get an agent, but it is worthwhile. And as I said earlier, it's patience and perseverance. And you can do it. Just remember that even J.K. Rowling was rejected by everybody before Bloomsbury took on the Harry Potter books. And actually, likewise, William Golding's Lord of Flies was found on the favour and favour slush pile. So no author I know hasn't had their fair share of rejections as well. Literature is subjective, and what you want is to find that one person who shares your vision of the world that you've created. Anyone who can't see it, you don't want to have represent you or publish you. Always remember that agents and editors' opinions are just one in a business that is full of opinions. Ultimately, you want somebody to love your work, absolutely love your work. You have to remember these people will be with you throughout your career and the entire publishing process. And it is a long one, because once you get the agent, you get the deal. Sometimes you're not published for 18 months, a year to 18 months. So agents are looking for writing that speaks to them, as are editors. So if they say they don't love it, don't take it to heart. They're doing you a favor in allowing you to find the agent who does, and who will go to bat for you with publishers and have faith in you. A passionate advocate in the business goes a long way. And now I've talked more than enough, so let's go to questions. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much, Katherine. That was such a brilliant set of tips for people to use. Some really great practical stuff in there that I think people will be able to go away and just sort of think about and act on right after this session. So that's fabulous. Thank you so much. We've got lots of questions. So I've tried to pick out the kind of the main ones that people are asking. And one of the first ones was, if a novel has been self-published, would an agent still take it on?
Yes, yeah, they can. I mean, it also obviously depends if it's been self-published, and there are some, like for example, awards out for self-published authors, or if it's had success, commercial success in terms of sales as well. But yeah, just because it's been self-published doesn't mean they would take it on.
Brilliant, thank you. So one of the other sort of really like quite a few people have asked this one. Can you get an agent outside of your country? Is it a good idea to get an agent outside of the country where you live if you want to publish in a different market, for example?
Sorry, I've got
that tail.
Joys of Zoom. I know. There we go. It's my assistant.
Wow.
So you can. I saw there, it popped up in the chat there, somebody said not usually in the US. I know a couple of authors who are represented, actually they're over here but represented by US agents, and actually some people are over here represented by Canadian agents, so it is possible to have it. And I guess they offer something different. Obviously they know the US market better, and a lot of agents want to retain rights, so the rights in all territories, worldwide territories. So publishers, we want to acquire as many rights as possible, and agents want to hang on to as many rights as possible. So somebody would put it out to, if you have an agent in the US and you're over here, they actually have sub-agents in the UK as well that they work with. So it's not a hindrance at all. If you want to meet your agent face-to-face regularly and you are over here and they're over there, then I would say maybe don't look for one that's in the US or Canada. But yeah, it shouldn't. I mean, like you said, the power of Zoom to be with people who are all across the globe is great now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this webinar's testament to that. We can all connect wherever we are really at the moment. So one question we had was, so we had author Lee Russell on earlier this week, and she suggested that her manuscript that she initially submitted to an agent and it kind of went to a publisher was maybe a little needed a bit of work, she kind of said, but they could really see that she was a good storyteller. And would you say that it's kind of common for publishers to take a chance on someone that they can see as a good storyteller, even if the manuscript maybe needs a little bit of polishing, or is it sort of more, if you can get it as absolutely, well, you would try and get it as polished as you can, but yeah, is that common to try and...
Yeah, I mean, I would always say, if it needs work, I'm an editor. That's what I like doing. I love working with authors on developing their books. So I'm not afraid of it, if it requires a bit of extra work. Usually when they're sent in, the authors, they're, all you authors out there, yourselves, you will be working away, you will be redrafting and drafting and redrafting constantly before you even try and send anything to an agent. And then the agent, instead of depending on what sort of agent you get, will work on it with you before sending out. If it still needs a bit of work, and I always like it if it does, because it gives me something else to do, then that's what it is. It shouldn't be off-putting, and if you see the potential in something, then that's what you want.
Yeah, definitely. So how do publishers and agents kind of work through submissions? So I know you said that in the UK, and I'm aware that the US and the UK sort of processes are probably slightly different sort of thing. But how do you kind of work through those submissions? So I know you said that you kind of mostly get submissions from agents, so they've kind of done that first sort of vetting process for you in a way. But do you use software to go through those, was a question we had, or is it somebody kind of, is there anything that kind of makes you go no kind of straight away?
I read them, all of them.
Well, yeah.
So when I get sent a submission, I look at the agent, who the agent is, what are they saying about the book, and then I will read it. Now, I normally used to be back in the day where I used to print out the manuscript and you'd be carrying it around in a big tote bag, but now I send it to my Kindle, or other e-readers are available, but because it's just easier to do. So normally I would read at least the first 20% and definitely the last 20-25% at the end, and potentially go in the middle for a bit. I want to know how it starts, and usually about 20-25%, probably about 50-60 pages. So you're looking at a decent chunk of what could be like a 300-page manuscript already, or 400-page, and then read maybe the last 50 pages. So that's gives you a good idea of the style and the tone of what they are on the saying. And if you like it, I will read the whole thing if I get to my 20-25%, 50-odd pages and go, I'm really enjoying this, I'll read the whole thing. But if I'm borderline, if I'm not sure it's quite right for me, then that usually is a good indicator of where, do I want to go and finish it, or do I think it's just, I'm going to pass? Yeah, and that's reading a lot over the years.
Yeah, you just really develop that sort of sense of what's gonna work.
Yeah.
So kind of with that in mind, I guess, what is the main sort of thing that you'd want authors to think about in their manuscript that they're submitting before they submit it, kind of thing? Is it kind of making sure that all of the grammar is correct? Is it trying to get a really kind of strong grounding in the characters at the beginning of the manuscript? Sort of what sort of thing does really kind of hook you in and make you kind of really want to keep reading?
I think if an author has an absolute idea of what they want their story to be, the grammar side, I mean, obviously for cover letters and things, that's one thing. But providing it's not every other word is misspelled or you don't really know what I mean. I want to be gripped by the character, the story. I want to know where I am. I want to turn the pages. I think the thing to remember is as an author, you want readers, not just the agent and the editor, but you want future readers to want to do that, to pick up your book, open the first page, read the first paragraph, go, I really want to turn the page. Everything else, the cover and stuff, that can be worked on by professionals, but the text is what story you're trying to say, and just say it in as clear a way as you can. I think probably the easiest way to do it.
Definitely. Not the time to be coy about your characters.
No, I think, you want to get a good sense of who they are, what they're doing, what your plot is as well.
Yeah, definitely. Somebody's asked what the sort of protocol is. Are you approaching sort of more than one agent in the same larger agency? If they have sort of several agents within an agency that deal with crime submissions, would you say kind of try and find the one that seems to represent authors that are the most similar to what you're writing, or can you submit to multiple?
I think if you're submitting to multiple within the agency, then again, it's a courtesy just to tell them I'm also submitting to, whoever. I'm blanking on names now. But yeah, just so they know. And again, there will be overlap, and a lot of it, with agents. So yeah, they just as long as they're aware.
Sure. Yeah, just kind of. I'm getting a sense that it is just these people that you are, as much as it feels like such a sort of a scary thing to break into, you're writing to people, and they are people that want to find writers and want writers to do well, and
yeah, exactly. We're all, it's literature's subjective, but at the end of the day, we're all readers. We're all passionate about what we do. We're all passionate about getting good authors into stories into the hands of readers. So that's who you're aiming for. You're perfect person.
I've got a couple of minutes left, so I'll try and sneak a few more in. Somebody asked about, in terms of the synopsis. Got my notebook down here, sorry. In terms of the synopsis, if you're writing a sort of trilogy or a series, is it a good idea to either do you want to stick to the sort of first one that you're actually submitting, or do you want to kind of give a sense of the kind of rise and fall, the action throughout the series or throughout the...
I would say if you're writing a trilogy and you know how you're going to plot it and how you're going to how it's going to develop, then definitely actually I would do synopsis for books 2 and 3. If you're not sure, but you're going to write a trilogy, is maybe just mention that and say, this is a part 1 of 3, and this is how I envisage the story direction to go, the narrative arc to develop across book 2 and book 3, and how it will end. So you can potentially work out the nitty-gritty later, but just let the agent know, because that is, they'll approach, they need to say to an editor that it is part of a potential series or a potential trilogy when they submit it, so that an editor knows what they want to acquire. It's a multi-book deal.
Yeah, they know what they're getting into, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is it how sort of much of a sway can being able to say you've kind of won an award or you were shortlisted for an award, a writing award, give you? Is it kind of better to start off with a submission to a writer's maybe publication or an awards or a contest, rather than to send inquiries to agents right away? Is it good to get that sort of thing behind you, or would you say that's kind of up to the author?
I think it's up to the author, because again, it's all about confidence, and at some point you need to put the pen down or the typewriter down and just go, it's now or never, I'm going to submit it. So it's up to, you know, yourselves as authors. You can do it in conjunction. You could send it out for a few, depending on when their deadlines are, at the same time as you're doing agents, or you could get some of that under your belt, you know, maybe some short stories and things under your belt, get those published, and then submit. But it depends, yeah, it's very personal, that side of thing, as to how you want to go.
Yeah. We've had a couple of, actually, and people won't be able to see everybody else's questions, but it's funny, we've had some conflicting questions. So we've had, on one end of the spectrum, are publishers likely to be interested in young authors, so sort of less than 30 years old, considering they don't have a lot of experience? And then on the other hand, we've had questions saying, I'm an older author coming in, is that sort of a prejudice against me? And sort of, is there any sort of difference in how I need to approach this kind of thing?
No, I mean, there's obviously always going to be the sort of the publicity around the Wonder Kid, you know. Nisha Dolan's in her mid-20s, I think, and has done very well in Exciting Times, and Zadie Smith, I think, was only 18 when she wrote White Teeth. So there's always going to be somebody, there's always going to be somebody younger, sadly. But actually, I published an author at my last job, only years after, called G.J. Minot, and he was a 62-year-old or 64-year-old debut. So there's plenty of opportunities for older people as well.
Yeah,
we're not ageist.
Yeah, no, all about your writing. Well, we have reached 8 o'clock. I'm really sorry, everyone. We've still got 50 questions in the Q&A box there. But as I said earlier, Katherine did say she would pop into the Facebook group. So if you are in our Crime Writers participants Facebook group already, we'll be popping up a post in there for you to comment with your questions underneath once we've got everything set up over there. So it'd be great to hear from you. And Katherine, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge. That has been so useful, and I know that, and I don't know if you can see the chat is going sort of such good info. Thank you.
My chat.
Yeah, no. But yeah, so thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Katherine, again for sharing your
Thank you for having me. Thanks everyone. Hope it was good.
Everyone. Bye.
Bye.